All right, welcome back here to the Gill Athletics Connections Track and Field. It's a long name, the Gill Connections. That's what everybody knows us as, the Gill Connections Podcast. I'm so humbled to be your host, Mike Cunningham, National Business Development Manager here. We just have a lot of fun here, manufacturing track and field equipment for around the world, and we do this little side gig called the podcast, and I'm super excited that you're here today, and I'm super excited about our guest today. So let's get started here. Help me welcome from Bettendorf, and we'll talk probably why I know Bettendorf here in a little bit, from Pleasant Valley High School in Iowa. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Kenny Wheeler. Kenny, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Summer's going well, and just excited to be on.
Do you, as a high school coach, I can only imagine, are you a teacher there as well?
No, actually, I'm an academic advisor. So I've been working in higher ed for almost 20 years now. So
Wow.
I work at Western Illinois University, Quad Cities.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. I was going to say, as a high school coach, I can't imagine the relief that summer brings. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because, obviously you love, and we'll find out more, but you love what you do. But
Yeah,
we all need a break, right? And so it's summer break. It feels like there's a nice exhale to start getting prepared for next year.
definitely. I know for us, so we normally host an elementary and junior high track and field camp right at the conclusion of the school year. So this past June, we hosted 240 like first through eighth graders. And so that is a big project. I mean, we have a lot of help from our student athletes, our coaches, our administrators from around our school district. So once that is done, then I can sort of exhale and sort of look ahead to the summer and just spending that extra quality time with my family.
Well, let's hop into that real quick before we jump into your actual story, your journey here. It's 200 and something K through 8 summer
Yeah.
track camp. That's amazing. Like I'm gonna say legit track camp, and what I mean by that is, are you actually like teaching them hurdles and maybe the discus and things like that, or is it like just running type of camp?
No, so it's a 4-day camp. We do Monday through Thursday, and we split up our days. Mostly it helps us as a staff just to take a break, especially if the weather is really warm.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our first through fourth graders come in the early morning, and then we bring back our fifth through eighth graders in the afternoon, and we cover everything. We cover our field events that we do in Iowa. So discus, shot put, long jump, and high jump.
Right.
We do hurdles. We do an acceleration station one day. We go through the different handoffs, closed and open. For our older kids, we do like a plyometric station, a core station through the week. And then we actually spend some time just talking with them about high school track and field and that experience, and hope that that's something that might spark some interest once they get to high school.
Wow. And how many kids?
240 this year.
Holy cow. And how long have you been doing that?
So when I moved to the Quad Cities in 2006, my wife was already teaching in the school district, and so she's the girls cross country coach at Pleasant Valley High School. So I just got involved with it right away. I think when I started, we were right around like 110, 120. And then I sort of took over the camp. Oh gosh, probably sometime around 2011, 2012. And we started out around 150 around that time. And then the interesting thing was the COVID year. I think that year off, I think the next year when we were able to have camp, like parents were just like, please kids, get out of the house. We ended up having like 226 kids that year. So it almost forced us to sort of reimagine what camp was and reorganized it so that we can incorporate that amount
Right.
of interest and that amount of kids. But it also just, I think one thing that was really special about this year is we had 32 current athletes come and assist that week. We had some alums come back and help out. We had some incoming freshmen come back and help out. So It is a full track and field community project. But we get great feedback from our parents and our kids, and yeah, we'll just keep doing it big every year.
The greatest feedback you can have is that people continue to sign up, right? I mean, in
Yeah,
a community like the Quad Cities, it's not the largest city in the world, right? It's not a Chicago, New York.
yeah,
So word can spread really quickly of like, this is a waste of time,
yeah,
energy, resources don't go, and you'll just dwindle down and die, but you continue to grow and healthy things
yeah,
grow. That's amazing. I,
yeah.
I have to imagine after doing this for so long, have you seen, I'm going to call it success stories. Have you seen a kid who, maybe never knew of track, but tried it and then went on to be really successful in high school in the area from it?
So it's it's always hard to just keep track of
Sure.
that amount of kids, over time. There's definitely kids that I remember coming through track camp and watching them flourish at the high school level.
Yeah.
Um, it was funny. We had a young man this past year, Luke Knapp, and he had come to track camp as a kid, but I remember him in track camp as a long jumper,
Mm.
and he has developed into a phenomenal mile and 2 miler for the boys team. And so he was a medalist at this year's Drake Relays in the 2 mile. He medaled at the state meet in the 2 mile, and then he is actually going to go and run for the University of Iowa next year. So it's been pretty cool just to sit back and watch his journey unfold.
Yeah, that is really something. And when I said successful, I mean, and obviously Luke had a lot of success as far as
Yeah,
state meet and things like that. But still being in track through their senior, a kid comes to you as a third
yeah,
grade, that's success. We have the number one participation sport on both high school and college level when you had boys and girls, men and women together. So
yeah,
literally, when you walk through the grocery store, you're more likely to run into someone who ran track on some level than you are for someone who played football or baseball, etc.
yeah,
And we need to continue to grow that sport. And that's why I'm so interested in this. Camps like that are what helps. 99% of those kids aren't going on to compete in college, but if they can have
yeah,
a great experience through high school, they become coaches, they become teachers, their kids eventually maybe one day participate in the sports. That's really something. And
yeah.
200 of them. Holy
Yeah.
cow, that is
Well,
a gaggle of kids.
and what's been really cool is in the last couple of summers, I've had coaches from other high schools in Iowa reach out and just ask, like, hey, would you be willing to share? Like, how do you structure
Yes,
camp? How do you advertise it? How do you get help for it? And so, just in terms of being an ambassador of the sport and providing opportunities for it to grow and to sort of expand interest within the communities wherever that may be. If we can be, one of the examples for that, all the
absolutely.
better.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. That's exactly right. Think about 200-ish pods in Des Moines, in Louisville, and
Mhm.
Lexington, and Huntsville. I mean, just spread
Yeah,
it around. What could this sport continue to grow into and be? And
yeah,
I think examples like that, and examples like Drake, and even the Iowa State meet, because when you go there, you have a lot of people in the stands as well for
yeah,
Drake, things like that. I think that's what gives me hope about college and professional track, of like one day maybe we can fill the stands.
yeah,
I know it's out there.
yep,
We just haven't cracked the code, and I think there might need to be some drastic changes, or maybe some out of the box creative thinking on how we
for
package
sure.
stuff. But again, I just think about, we walk around and we are way more likely to walk into someone who did some form of track, or if you
Yep,
expand it out another level, a family member did track, a
yeah,
mother, father, son, daughter. We've got people that have at least some interest in
yeah,
track, and they're not in the stands. And some people
yeah,
who never have any interest in basketball and football, but they're in the basketball and football stands. We can do this.
yeah,
And I love that you're doing it right there in your community for a youth camp, man. And again,
yeah,
200 plus, that is quite
yeah,
amazing. That really
yeah.
is.
That's
That's
really
awesome.
fun.
Well, that's a awesome way to start off this episode. Holy cow, we haven't even figured out who Kenny is yet. Let's jump into that, Kenny. Let's get back in our Wayback Machine here. And somewhere along the way, assuming that you were an athlete, coaching had to, in your mind, had to change. Coaching, when we first start interacting with it, is something that's done to us. Go run this, lift this, throw this, jump here, etc. And somewhere we get the idea, it changes, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, like maybe I could actually, maybe I could be a coach. I'd love to be, emulate my coach. Where does coaching and track and field kind of start?
Yeah. So track and field for me goes way back to the 84 Olympics in Los Angeles. So my dad's a retired pastor, and so like early in his career we had moved around quite a bit. But we had lived in Los Angeles at that time. So I think my first memory is Edwin Moses in the 400 hurdles.
That's a good memory.
Just his grace and just his consistency and just greatness over a number of years, and Carl Lewis and Florence Griffith Joyner. So, right then it was like, I want to be an Olympic track and field athlete someday, however realistic or non-realistic that could be, that was it. So, so I ran track and field in high school. I had two awesome coaches.
Were you in LA then, or where did you?
No, we had moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So
wow, you did move. Okay.
Yeah. And that's really where I spent most of my formative years.
Okay.
And so my first high school coach, Larry Gardner, he was like this fitness buff. I mean, the guy he was in his 60s, but I'd never seen someone at that age so like physically fit.
Right.
But he was also my health teacher. And he just had a way of always getting me to try new things, but doing it in a way where like I felt confident about it, even if it was something completely different and new. And then once he retired, Christy Wilkie, she was our cross country coach, so she took over our boys track and field program. And that was interesting because she almost came to me for help at times, since I was sort of the veteran on the team, and she didn't, have a lot of experience with the sprints and jumps. And so, when I think about that and sort of what it means to teach and to coach, that was sort of my initial experience with that. I went to Luther College, a Division III school in Northeast Iowa.
Yeah, no.
I played football and ran track there, and was a biology major. And I had a fantastic college coach, Jeff Weddick, and have never found someone more enthusiastic about coaching and the sport. And when I think back to like myself as a coach now, like he is the person that I would want to sort of emulate. Just his sense of like care and concern. He certainly pushed us. I think back to some deathly workouts we had. I don't know if they necessarily built character as much as just like fatigue and wanting to just crawl into a hole and go to sleep. But it was the challenge that was always fun. He was fair. And what I say by that is he always gave each of his athletes any and every opportunity to, compete at the highest level, compete on our top relays when it came to our conference meet, and making bids to try and qualify for nationals. But he was also just human. Coaching wasn't, bigger than him. He was a very authentic, church going, Christian loving. And that's who he is now, to this day when we cross paths. And so,
can you, that's an interesting, I'm curious how you describe that, that he was human. I like, that might be one of the best describers you can give someone. And it seems so Like, well, of course, we're all human, but it's
Yeah.
I can hear the feeling behind that. Can you give us an example of how that showed up with him, whether it was to you or to a teammate?
Yeah, it's just, for him, I think it was just this genuine compassion for everybody. And I'll tell you sort of a life changing moment for me as an athlete. So we were in a meet at Augustana College here in Rock Island, and um, I was a triple jumper as well, and so I was not having a great day, and and he could see that. I mean, he could always sort of sense how I was feeling just in my demeanor. Um, but I mean, I was just frustrated. I was fouling. And something that I knew was sort of out of character for me. I remember this clearly. I finished a jump. I don't know if it was just a poor jump or I fouled, but I mean, I just took like a small handful of sand and I just like threw it in frustration. And I remember he came up to me like after that event, and he just came and checked on me. He said, "Kenny, how are you doing?" And like from that moment on, it just changed a matter of perspective that no matter how I'm doing, like the opportunity to compete is always a blessing. And there should
Mm.
never be, you can have some negative feelings about a performance. I mean, that's going to happen, and when you strive to be the best at what you do and you fall short of what you think you're capable of doing, yeah, that's going to happen. Um, but to not let that linger, and just to have him come and put his arm around me and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
like things are going to be okay. Like we'll bounce back from this." And I think like that now becomes so more instructive as I work with athletes to help them work through those same sort of ups and downs of being an athlete. It's just something that's just always stuck with me.
It's interesting. We say this a lot of times, but we don't necessarily reflect back on the actuality of it. We talk about, the experience of college athletics in general, but, track and field here specifically, that, you're going to go through 4 to 5 years in college, 4 years in high school. As the years move along, you're going to forget most of the races and
Mhm.
PRs and things like that, but you're going to remember your teammates and your
Yeah.
coaches and those interactions. And so that story there, it's interesting, all the things that coach did for you guys, the successes that you had, the success that you had, etc. One of your core memories is, oh, I was having a terrible meet, and he just
Yeah.
put his arm around me and was like, "Hey, Kenny, how are you? Like, are you?" What I
Yeah.
love about that is we've heard the saying, "Coach the person, not the event." That was the way I kind of hear that is that was his way of coaching you. Like you're
Yeah.
a person, you're Kenny first, not triple jumper
Yeah.
first. You're Kenny who happens to triple jump, and today we just didn't do that well. But guess what? We got another crack at it next week, and
Yep.
even if that bombs, you're still an amazing human, an amazing
Yeah.
person. So I
Yeah.
love that story. It reminds me kind of the opposite too. I've seen some coaches and experienced some coaches who, when an athlete has a bad race or jump, etc., they'll turn their back on them, and like we'll talk on Monday. And what strikes me with that is I truly believe they still care about the person. I truly believe. I don't think
Yeah.
they just shut that person off. It's like, oh, that person is dead to me. They'll come back alive next week and we'll try it all over again. I just think
Yeah.
that they show it in a very awkward way that also sticks with, because remember, we got to remember, we're dealing with kids, even in college,
Yeah.
18 to 22-year-old kids. I think I think they walk away with an experience of like, oh, that if I was performing well, coach liked me, but if I wasn't,
Yeah.
he or she didn't like me. When in reality, I truly think the coach really does care. I mean, it's hard to be in this kind of profession and not care,
Yeah.
the highs and the
Yeah.
lows. But boy, I think there's a lesson there of like, hey, they're always watching. Kids are always watching, and I don't want to say they're fickle, but boy, if
Yeah.
you show some negativity because of a performance, ooh,
Yeah.
boy, I think you heard a lot of trust and love and admiration for the future there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've really tried to point out at the beginning of our track and field season is we let our athletes know first that failure is okay. Like that is a positive step to learning and improving. And we are in such a high achieving school district that, you know, perfection always seems to be like the goal, and it just can't be in sport.
Mm-hmm.
But we also let them know when we critique them, we are critiquing them to help them to be better athletes. It's not a reflection of our feelings towards them as a person. And I think particularly as a girls track and field coach, we have to be important about being able to separate that, you know, because we don't, for some of them, like running is their identity. And so when you start to step on that or critique that, you know, you have to be really mindful about how are they going to take this, and, you know, how do I as a coach make sure that what I'm communicating to them is meaningful and will steer them in the right direction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. And what a tough task. I know you mentioned on the high school level there, girls specifically. But, you know, I think it's both. I know, you know, I think it's easy to say, oh, you know, boys are easier to, you know, laugh it off. But I think that's because of the society, maybe pressure of males of like, keep your emotions to yourself. Don't show your emotions. I think, you know, and I think it's showing out there that there's some real, you know, I don't know if it's the key niche term or whatever, mental health. There's some mental health issues on both sides. I'm not saying, and I don't hear you saying walking on eggshells. I hear you more saying of being intentional and thoughtful to critique and positivity of what you're saying, coaching wise and off the track stuff as well.
Yeah. I took an FCA class with some other coaches a few years ago, and one of the things that we talked about was like for practice, for example, when we're in season, I've got 2 hours and 15 minutes with my athletes. And like, gosh, am I fighting for like their attention during that time with all of the other pressures and activities and stressors that they have going on? And so like for me, it's really like, how can I be most effective? How can my coaching staff be most effective in how we reach and impact our athletes in that short amount of time that we get to fight for? And so that might be their only time where they hear positive messages during the day, you know? And so what sort of stake can I claim to their heart in that amount of time that will impact them in a positive manner, so that when they leave practice, they're like, you know what, I can still go out and face the world, and, you know, I'll be okay.
Yeah, I love that. What kind of stake can you put in their heart? The positivity and love. You're right. They're getting so much negativity from social media and their friends and the society in general. How can you make this 2-hour block like, okay, here's something worth fighting for, something that you're going to be admired for working hard and trying. I almost said succeeding, but trying, because you're right. Failure it's track and field. I mean, we are a sport. We love to lift up the sport of track and field as the winning and the PRs, but guess what? It's a sport of failure, meaning you are not going to PR every time. You're not going to set the world record every time. If you're in a bar event, that bar is going to fall down every time.
Yeah, so definitely.
We have to build up athletes and coaches who can withstand that and come back stronger every time, whether it's the actual physical part or mentally and spiritually as well. I love that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Kenny, let's keep on your journey. When you started school there at Luther, and I know Luther well, it's a great, great school. What did you, when you came out of high school and you were going to Luther, what did you start as a major? What did you think a career you might be? Maybe you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, a business owner. What did you
Uh,
start out as?
so it was really between like computer science and
Yeah.
uh, medicine. And
Okay.
so
Okay. Yeah.
uh, I literally remember my freshman year, first day of intro to computer science class. I walked out of there and I'm like, I've never been more confused in my life. So I dropped that class.
Well, now hold on. No, I have a similar experience. I'm
Yeah,
interested in this. What do you remember what language it was? Was it like basic or C++?
it was C plus plus. Yeah,
Yeah. Uh,
yeah.
so I was a computer science major in college
Okay.
and had never really tried hard in academics, but I wanted to, like, I was going to be a programmer. And
Yeah.
so I decided this one semester I was going to, like, I was going to study. Like, I mean, I was really going to buckle down, and I did. And I was in a fraternity. My fraternity brother was already working for Apple uh,
Okay.
as a programmer, was the school or class tutor, but no one came to his sessions but me. So I had like a private,
Yeah.
basically, tutor for this. I got A's in every one of my classes except C++.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, ooh, it doesn't get any easier than this. Like it's
Yeah.
only going to continue to get harder. And I just busted my butt. And it's not computing, if you will.
Yeah.
I couldn't. It to me it was an amalgamation of math and foreign language. That's what computer programming
Yeah.
to me was, and I was like, oh, I'm not catching on here at all. So
Yeah.
you were smart enough. You saw it in day one.
Yeah. I was like, I'm
You're
not
much
gonna.
smarter than me. I was stubborn. I was like, I'm gonna give it a whole year.
It's like I'm not gonna dig myself in a deeper hole. So, um, but yeah, I knew I always liked the sciences. Particularly like anatomy and human biology. So, biology ended up being my major. I went so far as to, um, well, we had a human cadaver lab. So my sophomore year, when I took anatomy and physiology, that was kind of a big part of our class, and I mean, it was just fascinating. Um, and I'll brag a little bit. I mean, I wasn't a 4.0 student, but we had an anatomy exam on the brain, and it was a 40 question quiz. And so our grading was done on a curve. And so when grades came out, they would post like this printed sheet of paper, and they'd have like the line for like the curve, like the middle C, and then like your ID number. And then you would just have to find that to determine like where your grade was. Um, and I was the only one out of our class that aced like the entire exam. And
Wow.
I just remember like, man, okay, like I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was fun. It was definitely challenging. Organic chemistry was probably the one class that kicked my butt.
Yeah. Isn't that the class that
Um,
like kills more majors than anything? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What is it, for a guy who I can't even spell
Mhm.
organic chemistry, but someone who went through it and at least passed it,
Yeah.
what is it? Because I hear that all the time about, there's jokes on TVs and movies about chemistry.
So
What is it
I
about
ended
that
up taking it
class?
twice.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So it kind of
and I
kicked
had
your butt
a
a little bit then.
Yeah, I had a different instructor the second time I took it. And
Right.
so there were two things that happened there. One was the second instructor, the way that he just taught it, I just
Very
connected better.
important. Very important.
But also I think going back into it a second time, what I didn't do the first time is really grasp it's such a course of understanding some of the concepts and foundational equations that you learned within those first couple of weeks. If you're not on top of that, because everything else builds on those foundations and expands on that. And if you get lost in there, I mean, it's just like calculus, same thing. If you lose something that happened in week 1 or 2, like you're going to be lost in week
Hmm.
10 or 11.
Hmm.
But yeah, when I took it the second time, I mean, I did great. Just knowing, okay, now I understand the expectations and how to learn and how to study for it. But yeah, I went as far as taking the MCATs twice. And I think it wasn't so much. When I look back and the decision that I made to not pursue medicine, it really came down to what sort of time do I want to be able to spend with my family?
Mm.
What sort of time do I want to be able to have to do other things outside of my profession? Um, for me, like autonomy and flexibility are big, important pieces for me as a professional. So, um, I mean, granted, those were unknown because I really didn't know a lot of what the profession would be
Right.
like. But I think those were important enough to me that it sort of scared me away to say, like, maybe this might not be the right fit.
Hmm.
And of course, the MCATs weren't the greatest, so that sort of closed that door as well.
You know,
Um,
I think there's a lesson when we don't talk X's and O's necessarily, but the way you talked about organic chem and even calculus of like, man, if you don't understand the first one or two formulas, like you're
yeah,
not going to be able to do the 10th or whatever, right? And
yeah,
with track, we get very caught up in the 1% workouts and how do we
mhm,
this 1% of technique, and it's like, man, if you would just take a step back and do the basics really, really well, you would be way better off. Like you'll be a
yeah,
superstar just on
for
that. It was just
sure.
interesting when you said that. I was like, oh man, that's just like coaching track, and doing track. Like if you get the basics, and we
Yeah,
want to skip over the basics, and it's like, man, if you would just pump your brakes, do those
yeah,
basics really, really well, you'll be way better off than trying
yeah,
to work on the 1%. That was just interesting how you said that.
yeah.
So what did you end up? Did you end up going into teaching, education, or how did you?
So after I graduated, I was actually doing it was this pre-med minority student program in Chicago,
Hmm,
through Northwestern University. So I
hmm,
spent the summer after my senior year doing that. Um, and at the same time, there was an admissions counselor position that had opened up at Luther. So
hmm.
I ended up applying for that. I got a call in June that they didn't select me. I mean, had an interview and that went well, but they chose another individual. Well, then they also came back and said, hey, we're looking at opening up this um, multicultural recruitment admissions position, which is something they had never had before.
Hmm.
And they asked if I'd be interested. So essentially, like they created a position for me because they felt like my interview was really strong, that they're like, we've got to get him on board in
Right.
some way.
This might not be the right position, but he's the right person for
Yeah.
us. How do we get this person on the team? Right.
Yeah.
That says a lot, actually.
Yeah.
First
Well,
of
and
all,
actually,
that actually says a lot about them, in my opinion.
yeah.
It's real easy for someone who hires, for a company. It's real easy to be like, oh man, that person is great. Just doesn't work out here. Maybe somewhere down the line, and
Yeah.
to be able to have the flexibility and the creativity to say, hey, I know this ain't the right position, but man, we would be stronger with this person on our team somewhere. How do we
Yeah.
make that happen? That says a lot about them as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They ended up hiring like one of my best friends. So it actually like worked out
Yeah, that's
okay.
cool.
But yeah, so I worked in admissions for 3.5 years at Luther. But during that time, and this is where coaching came in. So my college head coach had asked, hey, like, are you interested in helping out?
Mhm.
And I was like, sure, that'd be awesome. I mean, for me, it was more so I'll get to continue training and competing.
Mm.
Um, but like I had some responsibility with our jumpers. Um, and but it really at that time was just I would love to help out and stay connected to my program. It wasn't a long-term goal or anything like that to get
It
into
was just help.
coaching. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so I did that for 3.5 years, and then it was time to go on to grad school. And I think I had a few people nudging me, like my future father-in-law and um, our dean of enrollment and marketing at the time. They just kept saying like, hey, have you thought about graduate school or going into higher education? And no.
I was just saying, what was the answer?
Uh,
No, or I would have done that.
but in thinking of how much I enjoyed my college experience and knowing the impact that I could have on college students and sharing that my experience with them. I think it just felt right, you know. So I moved on to the University of Iowa. I moved into their it's a long name, their student development and post-secondary education program. And so that was a cohort program. So it was a 2-year program, and just, you know, lived not too far from Kinnick Stadium. And that was a really fun experience. My youngest brother was a student at Iowa and was on the football team his first 2 years. So
Oh, wow.
it allowed me to connect with him because there's kind of a larger gap in age.
Okay. Sure. Cool.
But through my admissions work at Luther, I reached out to the guidance counselor at City High School in Iowa City. And he was the boys' head track coach at the high school. And he had just taken over for the legendary John Raffensperger from City High. And so I told him, you know, hey, like, I'm happy to help. I'd love to volunteer. Like, I have some experience coaching jumps. And they were actually looking for a jumps coach. So it just worked out. I had to get my coaching certification pretty quickly, just at the start of the season. And so that was my first year really sort of diving into coaching. I mean, they just said, hey, Kenny, like, this is yours. Like, let us know when you need your jumpers. We'll send them over. Like, you can, you know, write your own workouts.
Right. Hey, pause right there, real Kenny. Is what's interesting. You know, we have listeners, you know, from every state and things like that. And every state does it a little differently. I can remember when I first started coaching high school in Illinois, I remember I had to take some class that we got a certification. It might have been like an hour or two. I almost said online, but I don't think we had online back then. But I remember, I don't remember it being very intense. I think it was more like, I don't even know, to be real. First of all, so long ago.
Yeah.
But every state does it different, because some states don't have. It's like, oh, you want to coach? Great, come on, let's go, and we'll coach. You know, what did, when you say you had to get the Iowa coaching certification real quick? What did that entail there in the state of Iowa?
Yeah, so I took mine through Kirkwood Community College, and we had to actually do it on site. So it was 2 consecutive weekends, like a Friday night, all day Saturday, and they say most of Sunday, but they try and get you out of there by like 2:00.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was, you know, coaching theory. One of the things that I remember, I really don't know why, but it stood out, but just the motto of do no harm when thinking about working with athletes. You know, we had to learn how to tape an ankle and first aid training.
Oh, wow.
You know, you dive a little bit into sports psychology. But yeah, that was it.
And this was, you were in a class with football coach, baseball coach, but this wasn't track. This was
correct.
High school coaching specifically for the state of Iowa in that sense.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was.
Do you think that helped? Because I'm just curious, because I know there are some states where, and I think it's the majority of states, that you don't have this. Like, it's just, all right, someone has vetted you that you can coach football, basketball, track, jumps, go. You're responsible for that person, school or athletic director. When you think back to some of the things that you learned, and I love that you know, there's obviously some memories there of, like, you know, do no harm, you taped an ankle, stuff like that. Do you think that helped you? It certainly didn't hurt you, but do you think, as you at least started in the first week or 2 or month of, like, oh, okay, cool, I at least know how to take an ankle, or, you know, something might go wrong here, or I was going to make them run repeat miles for my triple jumpers, but that might be harms, and I was taught not to do no harm. Anything that actually helped you, or was it just like, I'm just checking off a box so I can actually get on the track and coach?
No, I think it was more like, I know I need to do this. I mean, I remember thinking of some of the coaching theory and sports psychology stuff being just really interesting, because those were always things I could sort of tie back into my own experiences. But as far as how that changed how I approached coaching, not so much. I mean, I relied probably more on my experiences helping out at Luther, and then just the way that coaches had coached me. But I also was fortunate that the style of coaches I had, it wasn't always about the training, or training was purposeful and not just volume. Sort of the kind of the old school, what people would call sort of coaching mentality.
Sure.
And so I think for me, and I think when I think back to going into medicine, when I think of my work in higher ed, when I think of coaching now, for me, it's always been about like relationship building. And so even though my first coaching experience was really sort of at City High, I think so much about the relationships I developed with those young men, because for somebody coming in new, they look at you kind of skeptical, like, well, who are you and what have you done? And how are you supposed to help me,
What
be
street
better?
cred do you have right off the bat? That's right.
Yep, for sure. So it was, I don't want to say it was a game, but, and this is, I thought of this morning. When you think about, like, I've had an opportunity to coach both girls and boys, and people will ask me often, like, well, which one do you like coaching more? And my bias will say girls, just because I've had more experience coaching girls and longer. But if you can establish a relationship with somebody and they develop so much trust in you that they're willing to do whatever it is you ask of them, they're going to perform. And then when they do that, that trust grows even greater. Now they're like, all right, now I'm on board.
Buy-in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to say, I don't know, it's probably outdated because, again, I haven't coached in 18 years now, 17 years. I used to say, I kind of like you, I'd had experience coaching boys in high school. I was in an all boys high school where I coached. I've had programs where at Ball State where I just worked on the women's side, and I've had co-ed. And I'd say, I preferred coaching girls or women because with boys and men, they all thought they were world record holders. And so I had to kind of like bring them off like you're not even working hard enough to be a first place person, so it was always kind of like I had to reality check them, where on the girl and women's side, and these are big generalizations here, certainly I had athletes inside that were not like that, but on the women's side it was more like they never thought they could win it all, and so my time and energy was spent on picking them up and like, oh, you can, like, look what you're doing. And I always like that building up more than I did that, I hate to use the word tearing down, but that, like, hey man, reality check here.
Yeah.
You ain't even running this, so you can't be winning that. But on the women's side, it was always like, oh man, no, you're getting down on yourself. Look what you just accomplished. Like you're in the right position here. So I always preferred coaching women for that reason. Alone. Yeah.
For sure.
It might be
those are probably similar experiences that I've had as well, working with men and women.
Yeah. So you were at City High, and you, I don't want to say it's your first coaching job, but it's your first, I don't know, formal, or however you want to deem it. How did it go? How did it go gaining the guys?
It went really well. I mean, we had some really stellar athletes. So I'll give this young man, Ben Evans was, one of the first young men I had an opportunity to coach in the long jump. And so my first year coaching him was his sophomore year. He ended up winning state that year. I think he jumped 22.7 or 22.9. Nice. He was Drake Relay's champion that year. And then we won state as a team, which was, I mean, we had some pretty special guys on that team. I mean, we had a quarter miler that was running 47 seconds. We had an 800 guy, Colin Sweeney, that was running 154. And I mean, we just had a bevy of sprinters and athletes. And then my second year, so I spent 3 seasons with them. My second year, we ended up as runner-up at state. Ben won state again and Drake Relays. And then his senior year, when you have that type of success, you start just expectations weigh on you a little bit more, but he had a lifetime jump his senior year. He went 23.4. We had a couple other guys that were in the like high 20s, low 21s.
Wow.
I think Ben was I think he was second or third that year at state. And then I also actually spent some time coaching some of the female long jumpers that year as well. Their coaches asked if I just would be willing to kind of work with them a little bit. So, but that community, and not just City High, but just Iowa City as a whole, has such a huge running tradition that, like, the support from parents and from athletic directors and former people involved in those programs was so supportive that I mean, it was just awesome how they embraced those kids and those programs, and there was just such a great history, particularly around City High's program. So yeah, that was, and I think back to City High's program, and when I eventually finished graduate school and moved to the Quad Cities area, I just knew that if I had the opportunity to build a program, it was going to be like City High. Like, I mean, they just built kids the right way. They always performed really well at the end of the season. You know, they did a great job of just continuously developing kids through their program, and they always had a ton of kids out for track and field. And so, you know, the interesting thing was, and we can get to how I was hired at Pleasant Valley, because that's a story in itself. But when my wife and I were both hired as coaches for track and field at PV, just after that, City High girls had a coaching opening, and they actually asked us to come back and coach their program, which was an honor to be able to be asked to do that. I mean, that just said a lot about how they thought of us and our relationships with them. Right. But we also knew, like, no, like, we want to be able to try and start our own program, and you know, we want to get to your level, you know, eventually, but you know, we just wanted to sort of kind of build our roots here and see where that went.
Before we get to how you transitioned to Pleasant Valley, what was your experience like as not being a teacher in school? You know, it's an interesting aspect when a teacher at a school is one of the track coaches, because you know, there can be a continuation of what happened at practice this past week, you know, continuing building up of like, hey, you had a bad practice, hey, we're in math class, you know, whatever, you know, you have more touch points. When I coached high school up in Chicago at that boys' school, De La Salle, same thing. I was not a teacher, so I only came in for practices and meets and such. And so there's uniquenesses there. Did you find any positives to it? I don't know that there's necessarily a positive. I think there can be, not it's automatic that there's negatives, but there can be some negatives. How was that experience for you as not being a teacher in the school?
So I would say more so in my role at Pleasant Valley as either an assistant or a head coach. It's twofold. So from the administrative side of things, is for being a head coach, I mean, I've had great relationships working with our athletic directors and their support staff, but it forces me to really sort of be on top of my organizational skills. Like, I just have to be, because I'm not in the school. Like, I don't have that ready access to
planning period. You can't go down and see
down the hall
director.
I think for my athletes, and you have to be, I mean, I feel like I've been really careful about this. So, you know, whether it's through email or social media, like, I use that just to, like, check in and say, like, how you doing? Sometimes we don't even talk about track. Just like, what's going on? Or think what I've started doing in the last 5 or 6 years is sometimes I'll schedule individual or group meetings with athletes. We might meet for lunch in the summer. We might meet in the commons at the high school after school, and we'll talk about, we'll sort of work into like, what are your goals for the year? But sometimes we'll take some time and for me, we'll talk about some personality things, or what gives you life? Like, who are the people closest to you and how do they motivate you? Sometimes I'll ask the question of, what do you fear? What are you afraid of? And sometimes those things give me far more insight into a student athlete
You've got to
than
garner
what I see on the track.
You've got
What's
to
that?
garner a lot of trust first, right? I mean, asking a
Yeah.
question like that, like there's a reason why the first question for you today, Kenny, was not, "Hey, so what are you afraid of?" Because we're like, "Well, hey, Mike, I don't even know
Yeah.
what you're talking about." Oh, pump the brakes, Big Daddy here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to really have earned some trust to get authentic answers, right? It's easy to give you
Yeah.
what do you fear? Yeah, spiders, coach. Next. But
Yeah.
the real answers of like, man, I fear making a fool of myself in front of my peers. You got to really have
Yeah.
trust with that
And
first.
some of these conversations don't happen until junior year,
Right.
maybe end of sophomore year, after I've had a chance to sort of
Yeah.
get to understand how they work through things, how they process things, how they react to certain things. You read and understand body language after a while, and
Yep.
and they're not afraid to come up and say like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I mean, for me, I think one of the things that my coaching staff and I do a great job of doing is we ourselves try and bring our authentic selves to practice. And I think in part that creates a sense of comfort and sort of gets rid of that, like, we're up here, so you can't, there's obviously, I think I try and be mindful of being in a leadership position. There's a power dynamic there, so how do I take myself down to their levels so where they feel comfortable, approaching me with whatever it might be. And I think particularly at any level, like that's important.
Yeah. It's interesting how you said that. How do I bring my authentic self to practice as well? You don't have this facade just because you're at practice and now you're a coach. It's like, yeah, you're still Kenny.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you have your own fears and
Yep.
motivations and faults and things like that. And I think, I don't know that necessarily that 14 to 18-year-olds are more perceptive to that, but they certainly aren't less perceptive than other people out there. They've been around adults enough at that point that they know who's trying to hoodwink them, who's trying to who actually has their back in real life. There's an understanding of like who's showing up as their authentic self and who's hiding, if you will. And hiding could be fears, etc. Absolutely. Okay, you had a nice smirk on your face when you talked about how Pleasant Valley worked out. What's the story there?
So in 2007, their previous track coach stepped down, and my wife had been coaching the girls cross country team since like 2003, I think. And so they had a head coach opening, so both my wife and I applied. And it's funny because it wasn't competitive or anything in our house. It was like, well,
good luck.
It's like, as long as one of us gets hired, like somebody's gonna be the assistant coach.
Yeah. What would have happened if a third party?
Yeah, that would have really messed
things up. Man, we both suck.
So she got hired. She got the position, and it's funny because my sister-in-law was like,
the better person got the job. I get it.
Yep. My sister-in-law was like, so did you and Kenny get along after that decision? And it was totally fine. So, but yeah, so my wife took over as head girls track and field coach, and then I was hired as an assistant.
I was about to say the real awkwardness would be if she didn't hire you as an assistant.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's like, hey, that's
yeah,
nice, Kenny. I'm gonna go a different direction.
yeah,
See you at home.
yep. But yeah, and that was a really like, oh crap moment, because that was the first time that I really had to think about like training and writing practice plans and how to organize things through the season. So um I was scared. I mean, my first year in that role, and we had, we probably had about 45 to 50 girls out our first year.
Wow.
And there was a little bit of a transition there just from, a previous coach to new coaches.
Certainly.
Um, but it was good. I mean, I look back on that first season and I just knew I was going to make mistakes. I mean, it's going to happen. And I think back to that first year and I made so many changes
Kenny,
after that.
I want to make sure we hear this story, but here is the snafus of filming these at my house. There's someone going to be at my door, so hold on one second. I'm going to
Okay.
put you can tell a funny joke. I'll have no idea, but I'll be right back. Okay.
All right. Yeah. No problem.
All right, I'm back. I'm not even going to cut that out. I'm not even going to edit that out. That is just real
Okay.
life right there.
That just happens.
Yeah, we're actually, behind the scenes here, dear listener. We're actually recording this on a Saturday, which means I'm at the house.
Yeah.
And my wife is out with my son, my daughter. Well, I thought she was here. She must be outside. And so a friend come, we talked about this, kids. The
Yeah.
doorbell always rings. So
Yeah.
a great friend of my daughter there. Like we talked about, the gaggle of girls that come over all
Yep.
the time. Okay, we were in the middle of a really good story. I want to keep going here. You found yourself first time really like having to write the prescription, and you found yourself kind of nervous, a little scared. I think might even been
Yeah.
there.
And that's the first time you're, working with parents and just a lot of things. I remember a young lady came up to me and we were practicing indoors and she's like, Kenny, I got to go to the bathroom. And I was like, do you have to go like right now? Like we're in the middle. And she's like, Kenny, I have to go to, and I was like, okay.
Finally caught on. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I think one of the great fortunate things of coaching with my wife is her experience coaching girls, her experience as a former high school and collegiate athlete just opened up so much more in terms of my sense of awareness of just working with female athletes, understanding just everything, things they go through physically, mentally, emotionally, some of the perceptions that people have about female athletes, and the whole idea that they're only good their first couple of years, as they grow and things like that. So I mean, that was such an instructive experience that first year. But then after that, I just, and I think going back to my time at Iowa City, I was like, I love this sport. Coaching really started to, I just felt its purpose calling me, and then I thought, yeah, I want to be really good at this, and so, I mean, I studied, I mean, I just dove in. on the coaching education side. And I really, as I've gone through my coaching experiences, I think one of the things that has really stuck with me is the power that you have as a coach and the influence that you have as a coach. And it's to know that kids have put like their trust in your hands is like the ultimate responsibility. So if I'm not doing everything that I can to put them in a position to succeed, then I don't know if I'm giving them the right value in this position.
So let's get into some specifics, Kenny, because I love how you said, you felt the weight of it all, and that's one thing. And some people run from that weight, whether it's coaching or other responsibilities, and others lean in. Certainly sounded like you wanted to lean in, and you said, so I did some things. Let's get into some specifics, because we've seen this with the athletes as well, right? Well, I want to be the best high jumper, but I'm going to skip practice 2 days a week, that they don't actually need to. Let's help some other coaches that are listening right now that are like, I have as well. So what did you do about it? What are some, you said you leaned heavily into coaching education. What are some specifics?
So the first thing I did was this old like coaching track and field manual. And I still have it. I think Dan O'Brien was on the front cover.
Was it the Omni book?
What's that?
Was that the Omni book?
I don't even know.
I can picture
I haven't
the one that
referred
he's
to it
on
in
there.
a while, but
I know exactly which one you're talking about. I can see the picture of Dan on there. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a thick book. So I kind of dove into that. But then I did I found out about the USA Track and Field Level 1 coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that through an area university, and that was for more of a more global, training all aspects of the athlete and understanding some different things. I probably would say that Clyde Hart was obviously a big influence for a lot of coaches.
Absolutely.
Obviously with his success and longevity, and both at Baylor and then at the professional level with with Michael Johnson and Sonia Richards and Warner and Darrell Williamson and others. But I also knew that type of training wasn't for us, to some extent. So after a few more years, I approached my athletic director and I said, hey, would you support like me doing the USA Level 2 class? And I remember her saying like, like no one ever asked me like to do these things. So like they actually funded me like to do the USATF Level 2 school. Did it through Marian University in Indianapolis.
Indianapolis, yeah.
And I just loved it. I mean,
what
the science stuff.
Did you do jumps or sprints? What track did you pick?
I did sprints and relays.
Yeah.
I want to go back and eventually do the jumps.
Absolutely.
But I mean, the science stuff wasn't too bad. Just being a biology major, I was like, all right, this stuff's fun. But I mean, the next 4 days of just really like immersing yourself in it, communicating with coaches of all levels. It's a really cool mix of people that run developmental programs, high school programs, youth, collegiate, professional, and just the classroom sessions. Charles Clinton from Los Angeles and Lauren Seagraves were our instructors, and I mean, I just could have listened to those guys for forever. But yeah, I think really diving into that was like, yeah, this is great stuff. But it's just been this continuation of like, I just want to pick up more information. So, Todd Lane's a friend of mine. He's a jumps coach at LSU. He's also a Luther grad. So like he was a bit of a mentor. Joey Woody at the University of Iowa. there's a group out of Texas. They have a handle called Fast University. That's on Instagram and Twitter. So I follow those guys quite a bit. But I'm just always just trying to learn. It's just this never ending, like, wanting to grow, but knowing, like, what else can I take back to my athletes
right
to help them improve?
How do you, it's funny, we had this conversation a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago, about, like, we'll say things very similar to what you are sharing your experience about, of that we should be lifelong learners, that we should be, if you think you know it all on how to coach the jumps or the sprints, get out of the profession, because you don't. We are always learning things like that. And I kind of, it's funny the way and I can't remember who said it, but the way the guest said it, it hit me in a different light than it's hit me before. And I started thinking about some coaches like John Smith and Brooks Johnson, and the other guy, I keep forgetting his name, and it's embarrassing. These guys who've done it for Lauren Seagrave, 50 years, and at a high level, like, no one's going to say they don't know what they're doing. They've won Olympic golds and things like that, right? And it just, curiosity hit me, and I was like, should they be continually changing and tweaking? Like, you have a formula? But what I'm really getting towards is, with you, is that the exact opposite side. I'm interested, as you continue to learn and you go and you hear Lauren say X, Y, and Z, and you're like, oh, I never thought about doing it that way. How do you actually come back into your program and implement these changes? Is it a wholesale change, or like, okay, boys and girls, we are changing up our warm-ups completely? Is it minor tweaks, like they almost don't even recognize? How do you actually continue to mold your program?
So I, to a fault, like, I can be really patient and deliberate. So I might have implemented something this year that I learned about 2 years ago.
Right.
But I have to, like, study it and make sure that I trust it and know how to teach it before I implement it.
Right.
I don't want to just do it to do it, or do it because it looked cool.
That's right. I think that's to your point about Coach Hart, right? So Coach Hart, again, no one could or should from the outside say, oh, his system was bunk. It's like, wait a minute. I understand he got a lot of great quarter milers out of high school, but they all improved tremendously. So his system works, at least for the people that he had there in Baylor. So I think, to your point there, of, you can't just, Clyde did that, okay, well, then I'm going to do it. That may not work at Pleasant Valley. It may not work at LA. It may not work for your level. It may not work for your personality and style either, right?
Yeah.
So you're right. I don't think you do it just because Lauren said it, Clyde said it, etc. It has to fit into your program. Your situation where you are, everywhere you are, is extremely unique.
Yeah. And it's hard because it's, like I've done, like, the Altus coaching classes online the last few years. And I mean, it is just so much information that it's just overwhelming, and so you just learn to, you've got to learn to just, what are they trying to teach? But also, like, be mindful of, I can still pick and choose. Like, I don't have to, like, we have a great program. I don't need to, like, go and change what we're doing.
Right. Yeah.
But if there are ways that, if there's gaps we need to fill in, or if there's concepts that seem to be missing as I reflect at the end of the season, that I need to think about, how do I need to teach this more effectively, or what sort of coaching cues are going to tie into certain kids a little bit more. If those are things that will enhance our kids' experience, awesome.
We have a saying on our side of things here on the business side: more, better, different. So what are we going to do more of? What's working? So we need to do more of it. What do we need to do better? Where do we have deficiencies? And where are we going to do things differently? Things that we're just, we're banging our head against the wall. So how do we do differently? When I think about, I was kind of thinking when you were saying there, I was like, when you're evaluating your program, where are there things where there's deficiencies? It's things that you can see. You're like, oh man, every quarter miler we have, we all die in the last 100, but boy, my boys and girls really die. Like, something we're not catching on that last section of the quarter mile. Or, man, we've got great 200 meter, 400 meter runners, and we got great 2-milers. We just can't get the 800 down. It feels like we have the talent. So those are places maybe you go and it's like, okay, we need to change some things. And then for better, maybe you in your sprinters and hurdlers, you're like, man, we're pretty good at accelerators, but boy, we'd be better if we did it even better. So what are some tweaks, things that you can learn inside of that? But the wholesale change, I think that, and I don't know that anybody does that, because that's a kind of a hard thing to do for your ego too, right? If you I'm just going to change everything because obviously what we're doing is not working. You're really saying, boy, everything I've been doing and learning and is wrong. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but boy, that'd be a hard ego check for probably 99% of us out there for sure.
Yeah. I think, assessment is scary. Like, it's important though. And I think, last year, I was a little frustrated with how we sort of ended our season. And, so I reached out to Matt Jones, who's the head coach at Loris, and they've had a lot of great success in the last 5-6 years. And I reached out to Brent Ewing at Indian Hills Community College.
Oh yeah. He's done pretty good in the 4 and the 8.
Yeah. And those were areas that I was like, let me first of all, let me like go back into like, what have we been doing to make sure I'm not missing anything? And I think one of the things that I had a conversation with Coach Jones at Loris about was, he's like, Kenny, he's like, you guys have a great program. Like, what do you need? Like, why are you trying to change everything? And then it was like, okay, maybe I need to slow down a little bit.
But you needed to hear that from someone else too, right? Like, we get in our box. I mean, there's a reason why they call it in your box, get out of your box. You aren't always going to be in your box. You need to help to see it from the outside. That's the hardest thing and maybe the most impossible thing. So that was awesome that coach was able to say, hey, hold on, Kenny.
Yeah.
What is it? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. It's like, hold on now. You've got a lot of success. Certainly you can improve, but maybe you're trying to think about too much here. Maybe you just need to do the more. Like, okay, we need to more of what we're doing to continue with our success and grow our success.
Yeah, we in the last couple of weeks, like, I've been reaching out to like some of our incoming freshmen and some of our current students that don't do track, but just trying to recruit some athletes to our team. And one of the things that I tell them is, because there's always the perception of track equals running. Like, track and field is just running. And so much of, you're trying to fight some of that perception a little bit. But I think one of the things that I tell them is, we were really intentional and purposeful and efficient about what we do. So we don't do things just to do things. I mean, there's a purpose and a meaning behind every single thing that we do, from the warm up all the way through the workout, through the cool down, through our talks after practice, through group activities that we do. I mean, we know where we're trying to get, and we're not here to make track and field an awful experience for you. So we're going to make this the most positive and fun experience that we can have. And we're still going to work hard, but you're still going to be able to walk the next day.
I love that. You're going to work hard, but you're still going to. I love that. That's awesome. Can you wrap us up here today? I'm curious. I'm going to put you on the awesome responsibility to represent all of Iowa and Iowa high school. There's some real uniquenesses in Iowa, so again, we've had high school coaches from Texas and New Jersey and Kentucky, and every state has some just culturally differences, events differences, etc. Start with, in Iowa, there's a fairly unique Drake relays versus state meet, and they're both at the same place, by the way, in Drake. But it's the Drake relays has a culture of being very important for high schoolers in the state of Iowa. In fact, that's only no out-of-state kids can even come participate there. And it's interesting because when you talked about some of your athletes, you said Drake relays champion and state like no other state would say. No one would say, like in Alabama, they wouldn't say, oh, they were the Hornet relay champions. And also the state, you know what I'm saying? Talk to us about that, the cultural importance of Drake relays as it relates to the state meet.
So Drake relays as itself is just the singular entity of where it's this crossroads of, there's a high school division, there's a university and a college division, and then there are specific, they have different titles every year, but sort of a professional / Olympic division. We have Paralympians come in. And so for the high school experience, to be in the same arena and to be in the same track and field event venue with individuals that do it at the top of their craft, I mean, it's an awesome experience. I think for us and where it falls in our season, it's important to us as track and field coaches, at least in my perspective, is it's a great preparation for our state meet. We try not to place too high a value on Drake relays because it's not a scored event for us.
Right.
But I mean, obviously understanding its history and prestige, and Michael Johnson's run there, and Sonia Richards, and Drake Stadium has hosted a couple of USA track and field championships in the summer. So it's a special place, and students that have had the opportunity to compete at that meet, I mean, though they remember the meet, they also, at least for us, because we have to travel, that's such an important part of that experience too. Our state meet, so we have 4 classes in Iowa, and we all compete over 3 days at our state meet. And I know this past year the weather was perfect for once, all 3 days, and it sold out all 3 days.
Wow.
But Iowa's a little bit unique. We have, I don't know if any other state has 7 relays as a part of their meet schedule.
Okay, hold on. I know this stuff fairly well, and I don't think I knew 7. So let's count it out. So I know there's the 4x1, 4x4, 4x8. I know there's the shuttle hurdle, because that's on my list to talk about too, because that's the greatest event in the world.
We have the 4x2.
Oh, okay.
We have the distance medley relay. Now our distance medley is different from college. So ours is 200, 200, 400, 800.
Okay, so the 2248, we might call that the sprint medley in college. Okay.
Yep. And then we have a sprint medley relay.
And what's that one?
A 100, 100, 200, 400.
7 relays.
Yeah.
Now, you don't do anything crazy like Texas. You don't double the points at state for the relays, do you?
No.
In Texas they do that, right?
I did not know that, but I have sort of done my own thoughts about, like, our swimming, the way our state swimming meet is scored. More points are awarded for relay events. I've always sort of been curious about that with the high school level, but no, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, Texas doubles them. So if you win the 4x1, you get 20 points, not 10. So it's kind of interesting, because on one hand, I kind of like it. I think maybe you're kind of thinking that with the swimming. It's like, oh, you're showing a real team event on a relay versus an individual. But on the other hand, I've heard a lot of concerns that because they're so like if you have a shot at scoring in the 4x1 or 4x4, you really should put all your kids there, even to the detriment of their individual events. And so therefore kids don't get marks for the open 100 because they're doing nothing but the 4x1, and maybe they have the 4x2. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I think they do. I couldn't
remember if they just had the big 3 for high school, 4x1, 4 and 8, but I wasn't sure. But 7 relays.
Yeah. So when you really think about,
wow.
So, and that can also be harmful. I mean, in Iowa, we have some really smaller communities, or we have communities that have to combine, just because of school district size. So, there's going to be teams that can't even fill a full meet lineup, or they have to spread kids too thin. It's a little bit easier to do when you have larger programs to be able to fill those. But when we talk about track and field as a participation sport, I mean, we live it. I mean, with 7 relay events, there's a number of more opportunities for kids to be able to compete.
So if you're a good to great 200-meter runner, you could be on the sprint medley, distance medley, 4x1, 4x2. We haven't even got to the 4x4 yet.
Yeah, and you have your 4 event limits, so you got
and you can do 4.
Pick and choose. Yeah.
So you're not running the open 1 or 2 or 4. You're not long jumping wow.
Yeah.
I did not see. I love this. I'm sure a lot of people listening right now are like, I had no clue. This actually makes the Drake relays more understandable in regards to the high school culture in Iowa, because it's like, oh, well, every meet you go to is almost like a mini Drake relays in the sense that there's a lot of relays there.
Well, and you have basically any official indoor meet and any outdoor meet counts as an opportunity to qualify for the Drake relays.
Mm.
So, I mean, some teams are going to take a meet and put together their top lineup for maybe a couple of relays,
right,
and that'll be, their focus, or, and so on. So, and then you're just sort of at the mercy of whatever the weather is like in the spring here.
Yeah. So we learned about some unique events, those sprint medley and distance medley. Let's talk about some other events where Iowa's a little bit unique. First of all, again, we have to talk about, I think it should be an NCAA event. I think it should be an Olympic event, the shuttle hurdle relay. There is no better event than the shuttle hurdle relay. So I love that. How's that been as an experience? I mean, it's all because I'm gonna call you from Iowa with this coaching career there.
It's been awesome. I mean, I think, for us specifically as a school, I mean, the hurdles has been one of our primary just events over the years. And so, but as most people like to call it, it's 40 opportunities for disaster.
That's what makes it so great.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's fun. And I think, for us specifically here at PV, I mean, we've had some great success. We set the state record back in 2016. Waukee and Waukee Northwest have been kind of the 2 prominent hurdle programs the last decade plus. But it's unique. It's fun. You can sort of see where you always know where the race is at, because you always know who's ahead. Mm-hmm. You don't have to deal with the curve or staggers or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So it's fun. It can also just be a very heartbreaking event.
Yes.
So, I mean, you really deal with sort of the emotional ebb and flow in that event.
A heartbreaking event of something that has you didn't do anything wrong. Like someone else hits a hurdle in yours, or gets thrown off into another lane and you're coming right at them. It's like, I either kill this kid or I pull out.
Yeah.
Hopefully most kids pull out. Yeah. It is amazing. And boy, do you have to have a hurdle crew that is on point, knows what they're doing, because they've got to go in and fix these hurdles during the race, stand while a kid runs by them, and then move out of the. I mean, your awareness. There is no other event like it. I remember the first time. I coached high school in Chicago, so there was a few shuttle hurdles down there. We had more modified shuttle hurdles, and so instead of like 4x110 or something like that, we would do like 4x110, but there'd be 5 hurdles at 36, like that. And then we went, when I was coaching at Troy University, we went to the Alabama Relays, and that was the first collegiate one I saw. And I was like, I was instantly like, oh my God, can we not do this everywhere? Like, this is the greatest thing in the world.
For the collegians, their hurdles are shuffled, which creates more of a visual disaster. Because they're not at the same mark like they are at the high school.
The same mark as Iowa high school, because you guys do things a little different. And that's the next event I wanted to talk about. Is you're one of the few states that does a 400 hurdles. Most states, the vast majority, in fact, Florida just changed from the 300 to the 400, but most high schoolers are doing the 300 hurdles versus the 400. Another unique thing that's been around for a while, I think, in Iowa.
Yeah. So it's a little different. So, the girls 400 hurdles are at 30 inches, which is
Right.
what they would run at the collegiate level.
Mm-hmm.
I still think, I can't remember if they raised them for the boys, but they used to still be at like 30 or 33
They
inches.
used
Whereas,
to be, I thought they changed that, but I'm not sure either. Yeah.
yeah, because when you get to college, it's 36 inches.
Right.
So,
I remember thinking when you recruited a 400 hurdler from Iowa, you couldn't just match up that time. Like, okay, they are going to go up in hurdles here a little bit. Yeah.
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 And,
So there's
and
a
you,
little different of energy expenditure when
right.
you have that. But
And your
um,
girls hurdles, I'm going to say recently moved, high hurdles moved from 30 to 33.
we did that in 2009.
Yeah. So that's what I thought recently. So, within
Yep.
14 years, that's a significant as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And girls are running faster over the 33s than they ever did over the
Absolutely.
30 inches.
Absolutely. Yeah. 33 is
It-
still for the majority of athletes is, it's a step. That's all it is. Yeah.
yeah.
If I remember correctly, we do not have triple jump in Iowa.
We are going to see if we can make a push for it, but we do not.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I, as a selfishly as a manufacturer of equipment, we really want this back in Iowa is the pole vault. The pole vault in Iowa.
Yeah. Um, if you want to bring some costs down on that equipment, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
If I could, trust me, I would. Absolutely. You're dealing with big old blocks of foam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know?
Yeah.
Did you were you aware right before COVID, some senator, and we certainly are not going to talk politics. That's the last topic we'll ever discuss here on this
Okay.
podcast. But some senator in Iowa tried to bring it up as a like you have to have pole vault in high school, and then
Yeah.
COVID hit, and I think that just crushed it. But
Okay.
it was the one time that Gill Athletics was like, all right, we're in politics. We whoever
Yeah.
that person is, we support that person.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think, the more we can create opportunities
Yes.
for athletes to open the door for them at the next level. We have a young lady that graduated in 2021 and was a fantastic sprinter and long jumper, and she qualified for nationals this year in the triple jump. And
Oh.
so, had she been introduced to that a little bit earlier, who knows where that would have taken her. She still has 2 more years of college left, but um
Now
but
you,
yeah,
you don't have the
just
you don't have the weird thing. Both boys and girls don't have triple jump, right?
correct.
Okay, because there was some state, and I think it's been rectified now, where the boys did triple jump and the girls didn't. And
Okay.
not only in today's day and age, but in any day and age, I'm like, I mean, what do you, I don't get that at all.
Yeah.
It does go on to the last topic here, and you're not from Iowa, so maybe you don't have history here, but something that's really unique in Iowa is your girls athlete. So your boys and girls. So in Illinois, we have the Illinois High School Association, and that's boys and girls
Yeah.
athletics for the high school association. In Iowa, you have separate entities. And if I remember right, of one of Logan Griner was teaching me about this. I guess it's the country's oldest girls athletic association for high school. Like it's a really powerful and influential
Yeah.
and strong association there. How much do you know about that?
Um, not a whole bunch of the history. I mean, we've had some amazing ambassadors within the girls union that have done an
That's
amazing
right. It's
job
called the
promoting the
union.
Iowa girl.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ewing Cooley. Yep. Um, we used to have separate state track and field meets.
Oh.
And that changed to a co-ed meet probably within the last 20 to 25 years.
Separate weekends or the same weekend but different locations?
Separate weekends.
Okay, good. Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
crossover. So in Illinois,
Yeah.
we do the same thing. We have separate boys and girls, and it's on separate weekend. Still causes its own issues, right? Because regionals is on one state meet. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I think, and my wife probably would be able to speak more to this, but I think particularly for girls to have a union that highlights them, supports them and their aspirations, and can lift up, the female student athlete, I think is a powerful
Yeah.
powerful message.
Yeah. It's very strong. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, that's awesome, man. Again, I put you in an unfair position to speak for all Iowa high school coaches. Yeah, by the way, for someone who's not a native Iowan, so you didn't go through the system,
Yeah.
obviously you've picked
Yeah.
up a lot and through the success you've had. So you've had, been involved in conversations of, how to
Yeah.
continually improve high school track and field in the state of Iowa. So it's always good to, our sport is, one of the oldest sports in the world.
Yeah.
We're very traditionalist, but yet we have a lot of extreme uniquenesses, which to me is the power of our sport. As far as the person of track and field, an athlete, we're the sport of everybody, tall, short, black, white, slow, fast, by the way, strong, weak. There is an event for you to achieve some form of success if you're willing to put in the work. And then across the board, from Iowa to Illinois to California, we do things uniquely. And on one hand, I'm kind of a not conformist. What's the word? I like things to be balanced. So on one hand, I kind of like, well, I wish every state would just be the same. However, I think, I love that a kid in Iowa gets an experience the shuttle hurdle relay. I love that a kid in Florida now gets to do the 400 hurdles, and a kid in California gets to do the triple jump. I do just wish there was, like, for triple jump and pole vault, I wish there was more opportunity for kids to try it. It's they're great events, and of course, because we have that on the college side, there's more opportunities for kids to earn scholarship and places on teams if they know how to triple jump out of high school. And but I take that across the board. I want the javelin in every state. Love the hammer to be in every state as well, because they're great events. They truly are. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you repping every Iowa high school. All your peers
hopefully they don't come after me. So.
Yeah. Let's say your peers are going to listen and be like, Kenny, you didn't mention.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to say, I think, speaking to the diversity of the sport, it welcomes everybody. And I think about one thing we didn't touch on this, but one thing I've really been intentional about, and one thing I've really enjoyed, is like my coaching staff. And we're fortunate to have 4 paid coaching positions, and then I have 2 additional volunteers, but we have 3 male coaches, we have 3 female coaches. A number of them teach different ethnicities, different college and high school experiences. And I also think that lends so much to the experience that our student athletes get to have. And it doesn't necessarily I don't have to be like their coach. I mean, if they find that they get along with another coach, or develop a closer relationship with them, or goes to that person for more advice, all the better. And I think that's what's really helped our program flourish. So, like, I always say, like, I can only be as good as the people I surround myself with. And I know my coaching staff has been amazing and has helped me to be the best coach that I can be.
Well, we know there is no solo. I know on this podcast, typically we have one coach on at a time. And what we try to stress is that, who you are and where you are today is a mixture. You stand on the shoulders of your mentors, your coaches that you mentioned, your family, friends, etc. And so as a member of a staff, I think I love how you put that. I couldn't agree more that, you are who you are because of them. You're better because of them. And we almost named this podcast the Gill Track and Field Shout Out Podcast. So why don't we end it? Give a shout out to that great staff you have there at Pleasant Valley.
Yeah, for sure. And first and foremost, my first shout out goes to my wife.
It was a test. I was going to see if that's where you would go first, honestly.
Yeah. Both, I've learned a lot from her as a coach. She stepped down as track coach back in 2019. So we had coached together for about 11 years. But as our kids got older, it was just the right time and the right thing to do. But yeah, definitely my wife. And then my assistant coaches, Kaz, Jason, Maddie, and Alyssa. They're the people that get me through the season and inspire me, and hopefully I inspire them much the same way.
You have 2 Maddies?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Different spellings though. So
Oh, there you go. Maddie with a
yeah.
Y, Maddie with an I or something.
Yep. Yeah. So they're my family, in and out of season, aside from my own family. So um, it's been a fun experience with those folks.
Well, no doubt, man. And I loved learning your journey from the high school coaches that spoken to you. Someone who moved around a lot, I know how that can
Yeah.
be. I reflect that. I've moved around a lot as well. You're always the new guy. And,
Yeah.
you're always having to learn quickly who's friends, who's not going to be friends, who's my tribe, who's not,
Yep.
and I think that helps in the regular world, the business world, and then also as a coach of just like, okay, let's, this is how we need to help these people adjust to either being new on the squad or new to the school or new to the event, etc.
Yeah.
So I love that background. I love it seems the way you described it, your college time and your relationship with Jeff just seems really impactful. Like I heard the way you talked about how he interacted with you and the rest of the team, and then I heard it again as you talked about how you interact with athletes and your staff
Yeah.
and things like there's a lot of influence from him. I'm
Yep.
gonna I like to give challenges, and I have a feeling that you maybe already have done this, but I'm going to challenge you anyway because it's a challenge for listeners as well. Um, some people call it giving roses, things like that. The great YouTube show, coaches, not coaches collab. They do a great job of doing this every episode as well. But if you haven't, or if you haven't done it in a while, I'm going to challenge you to reach out to Jeff, phone, email, text. I don't think we like to put a lot of love into handwritten letters, but to me, the mode doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's the intent behind it. But I'm going to encourage you just to reach out and be like, hey, man, I got to relive some memories that were really fantastic and impactful on me, and just say thank you.
Yeah.
We as a society, we're really quick to point out negatives and really slow to point out positives. And I would love to flip flop that, at least make it on par. A 1-to-1 ratio would be amazing to me, where we just thank those people that have spoken into us, that have made us who we are. Again, we stand on the shoulders of all the people that have poured into us. I'm thinking right now of the great Harvey Glantz, who just passed away recently.
Yeah.
And he's someone who he just did what he does. So it was nothing special to him, but
Yeah.
he did something very air quotes small to me when I was a beginning coach that really meant a lot and kind of helped me like, oh man, maybe I should do that too, because he didn't have to do it. He big time. Maybe I should do it.
Yeah.
I never got to thank him in person, through text, whatever, through Facebook Messenger. It didn't matter. I shouldn't say I didn't get the chance. I had plenty of chances. Shame on me. I never took the time, and I have a little bit of regret on that. So I just want to, challenge you, whether it's Jeff, and there's many other people, obviously, that have impacted you. I challenge you just to reach out and just give a thanks. Man, you affected my life. And here's the cool part: you affected my life positively, which means I now kind of expand that through a bunch of other kids, which means you have influence over them as well. Like your coaching tree is much bigger than just me individually. It's all the kids that I coach as well. So just challenge you for that, Kenny. I feel like you may have done that though. Feel like you're kind of the
we actually at our coaching clinic a couple of years ago, Coach Weddick was there, and I actually shared with him that same story.
Awesome. I love that.
And I'll actually see him this next week. So
good.
Yeah.
Give him a big hug and just be like, man, thank you. I mean, those two words are some of the most powerful words we have in society, and we keep them locked inside. And I'm on a mission of gratitude and attitude, and so I just I would just challenge you for that. When I do that, what it really does, it's kind of selfish. I kind of go, oh man, I'm saying this to Kenny. You know who I have not spoken to in a while? Well, I need to, I need to enact, not just react to it as well. But Kenny, man, thank you. I'm just so grateful, to take time out on a weekend. I'm a big proponent of, there's coaching in your personal life, and, coaching is not the most important role that you have. Husband, father, son, brother, those are way more important roles than coaching. And you've allowed me to take some of that time to talk about your coaching role. So I'm really, really thankful for you and the time that you would spend with us today.
Well, I'm appreciative and humbled to be a guest and to be invited. So thanks for allowing me to share my story a little bit today.
Absolutely, man. You deserve it. I really appreciate you. And I appreciate you being here and listening once again. What an amazing story. I really do. I need to do a better job of getting more high school coaches here. My world is more in the college world. So that's kind of my first thought on guests and things like that. But I am always fascinated by how much I learn from the high school coaches and their differences and their uniquenesses. I mean, you got to admit it. If you're a high school coach in Iowa and you've got 7 relays, you've got some coaching to think about and strategy and how you implement your kids. And maybe it makes your roster size even more important than it does for Alabama or South Carolina or wherever. But it's always fascinating. So I'm going to put it on myself to do a better job of getting more high school coaches here on the Gill podcast so we can all learn together. And let's do it again next week. Join us next week. We hope to see you here on the Gill Track and Field Connections podcast. Bye, everybody.